relationship between ancient Greek theater and the movies? That's something we'll think a little bit about this week, as we are reading two more tragedies by Aeschylus, the Libation bearers, also known as the Koryphoroi. This literally means libation bearers. A libation is a sacrifice, a liquid sacrifice, so something that you pour out like wine. And the second play called the Furies. In ancient Greek, the word is erinies. And I'll explain what this word means in a moment. So those are the second two plays in Aeschylus's Oresteia trilogy. And we're also watching a movie called Protagonist, made in 2007. It's a documentary by Jessica Yu. First, a little quick word about the ancient Greek theater. This is a very rough diagram of the theater. The audience would have sat here on sloped seats made of stone, maybe of wood, called the theatron, from an ancient Greek word theomai, which means to see. The whole structure is often called an amphitheater. The word amphi means around. This circular area is actually called the orchestra, and it doesn't refer to music per se, like the modern word orchestra. Orchaomai is an ancient Greek verb meaning to dance, so the orchestra would have really been the area where the chorus sung and danced. The skene is a wooden structure. It was very simple, so if you watch the videos for modern performance in masks with all male actors of Agamemnon, you might have noticed that there's the set for an ancient Greek tragedy is almost barren. It's very simple. You have just the skene, a wooden structure. Initially, it actually only had one central door, and also had a roof. So there's also in some plays the people would appear on the roof of the skene. Maybe a god would appear, for instance. But again, a very, very simple set. And the skene becomes important if you think in the Agamemnon. The skene, of course, represents the palace in Argos, where Clytemnestra meets Agamemnon. It's where she rolls out that red or purple tapestry that she gets him to walk on. And then if you think of the scene, Agamemnon walks into the skene, into the palace, the door is shut, and if you know about the play, that's really it for him. Then we see Cassandra, the Trojan prophetess. She prophesizes. She goes behind the scenes into the skene, the door shut, and the chorus sings and dances again in this orchestra. And at the sort of denouement, the unraveling of the play, the doors open of the skene, and then if you watch the production, the bodies of Agamemnon and Cassandra, bloody, very red, and under a net, emerge with a triumphant Clytemnestra behind them. So, some of the conventions, again, of Greek theater are not only this very simple set. There are only 3 actors. So you have to keep in mind that, in the production that you see, the bodies of Agamemnon and Cassandra are mannequins. And then Aeschylus, who is Clytemnestra's lover, Agamemnon's cousin, appears, and because of this rule of the 3 actors, it's likely that the actor who plays Aeschylus may well have been the actor who played Agamemnon, for instance. So, and then just to finish up this diagram, this is called the parados, these 2 entrances, and the chorus would have actually marched in. Odos means a road in ancient Greek and modern Greek too, and marched in from the sides and therefore come onto the orchestra. One other thing to keep in mind about ancient Greek tragedy is that, it is very violent. The libation bearers that we'll be reading this week also contains another act of violence. In the play, Orestes is the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. He has been sent away while his father was at Troy. So he's grown up elsewhere, and he comes back to revenge his father's murder by his mother. And we don't see the violent act that happens. It always happens off stage. And that's a convention in ancient Greek tragedy, that you really do not see the terrible acts that are described. If you've read the Oedipus Rex, for instance, by Sophocles, at the end of that play, Oedipus, after he realizes that he has married his mother and killed his father, he goes off stage and he blinds himself. He returns with bloodied eyes, but we don't see that. And that it wasn't considered, or at least as Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, talks about in his Poetics, which is one of our first works, really, of literary theory from ancient Greece, in which Aristotle talks about what makes a good tragedy. It's called Poetics, but it's really a lot more about ancient Greek tragedy. Aristotle talks about what is to prepon, or fit or proper. And so, let's see. Prepon, what is fit or proper. So seeing these violent acts is not considered fit or proper. You could say, at least to see. But certainly it is fit and proper, or appropriate, or it's the stuff of Greek tragedy for us to feel, to have some kind of experience of terrible things happening. So talking a little bit about that in terms of Aristotle. Aristotle, in his Poetics, he talks about how there's the audience of watching a Greek tragedy, in a good Greek tragedy, is somehow going to feel pity and fear for the hero, or you could say the protagonist. This is, again, from another ancient Greek word. Prota means first, agonistes, well, agon means a contest. So this is the actor, you could say, he drives the action forward, he sets things in motion. You can think about that a little bit, maybe in terms of Clytemnestra. I think in the Agamemnon, she seems to set a lot of things in motion, and that's kind of interesting, of course. She's not a male character, she's a female character. It's very dominant in that play. When you're reading the Libation bearers, the protagonist is definitely Orestes, the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. And Orestes, you'll see, is a bit of a tortured soul because, watching Kakougiannis' movie, he actually is a little boy. And so in the Libation bearers, he's all grown up. He's a young man coming into his maturity. He returns from his exile away from his home in Argos. The first thing that happens, you'll see, is that he meets his sister, Electra, who has the younger sister of Iphigenia. Electra has grown up in a household hating her mother, Clytemnestra, hating her mother for killing her father, Agamemnon. And Orestes meets her while she's giving libations, again, liquid sacrifices to the grave of Agamemnon. And there is a scene that occurs where Electra has to recognize Orestes because, of course, she hasn't seen him in many, many years. So keep your eye on the tokens that identify Orestes to Electra. There are two of them. One of them involves a body part, hair, nothing gory. One involves a tapestry, and the third one is, check out what it is. It might seem a little improbable, but it worked within the play. So there's this recognition scene where the two siblings get together, and then Orestes manages to sneak into the palace of Argos, and he takes his revenge on Clytemnestra. And that, you could say, is sort of the climax of the play. But thinking again about Aristotle, so Aristotle says that, in a really good tragedy, an ancient Greek author is going to get the audience to feel with, literally, sympathy. Shall we say? Sympathy? Well, I mentioned that because our word sympathy comes from the Greek word pathy, which means to feel, and sim means with. So the audience is going to feel something with this tragic hero. So we, the audience, we somehow, all these people sitting here, are going to feel what's going on with Orestes. So Orestes does get his revenge. He does kill, off stage, in the Skene, you could say, Clytemnestra. And then after that, something happens where the audience will definitely have a feeling of fear. I think you will as you read it. Orestes goes mad after killing his mother, and that is how the Libation Bearers ends. And what happens is we know that he goes mad because he starts to say, this is on page 111, very towards the end of the play, The Libation Bearers, I do not know how it will end. I am a charioteer with a runaway team, hurtling off the course, losing grip of the reins, losing grip of my mind, spinning out of control. My heart dances in terror and howls a furious tune. Will I still have my sanity? Know this, I killed my mother with justice at my side. She was a defiled murderer, the gods hated her. What compelled me to do this? What magic charms? The greatest influence was Apollo's prophet. The oracle told me, do it and go unpunished. And if I had failed, the penalty defies description. Orestes ends by going mad, and keep an eye on the imagery, the color words, especially the animal words again, that Aeschylus uses. I mentioned that in terms of Agamemnon. Aeschylus his language, you get the real sense if you can read it in Greek. It's so good in Greek. His language is powerfully laden with images and metaphors, and in this trilogy, definitely references to color. So that, think of that red or purple tapestry that Clytemnestra lays out, the blood after Agamemnon and Cassandra are killed, the blood after Clytemnestra and Aegisthus are killed, and then what happens to Orestes, but he feels that he sees, as he goes mad after killing his mother, women like gorgons, black-clad, writhing with snakes. So that's how the Libation Bearers ends. And if you don't feel, think about how you feel. Fear and pity. Fear for what Orestes is happening to him, and also pity, because Orestes is a tragic hero in Aristotle's sense, because he's not done anything to be put into this terrible position of having to avenge his father by killing his mother. His parents had committed various acts that we talked about in reference to Iphigenia, and he is trying to do what he can do, what he feels he has to do. In Orestes' case, he feels that the god Apollo has told him this is the way to seek justice for his slain father. And in the Libation Bearers, his sister Electra kind of eggs him on, you could say, or you can see if you think that she does. So this brings us, though, to the Furies. So this play has often been called by two names. The Erinyes is the Greek word for the Furies. These are avenging female spirits. In the play by this name, they are the avenging spirits of the slain Clytemnestra, hounding Orestes after he's killed his own mother who bore him. The play starts in a temple at Delphi, the temple of the god Apollo, where Orestes has gone to seek safety. And the Erinyes in this play are actually the chorus. So, women, with snakes coming out and slithering around the stage is very, very, how would you say, it gives you a strong visceral feel of these avenging, awful spirits that are hounding him on his trail. But by the end of it, at the end of the play, the Erinyes become transformed into something called the Eumenides. This is an ancient Greek word that literally means the kindly-minded ones. They go from these awful avenging spirits to kindly-minded. Eu is an ancient Greek prefix that means well or good, and many of these refers to the mind. So how does this transformation occur? Well, Orestes finds out that he can go to a city called Athens. This is in mythological time, way, way longer, before any kind of history was written. Orestes finds that he can go to Athens, and there he will be judged by a jury. He goes to Athens, no dictation of space or time. He goes from Delphi to Athens. It's not a long ride in modern Greece today, but in the good old days, ancient Greece, you would have, of course, had to travel by foot. Orestes ends up in Athens, and there's a courtroom scene where Orestes is defended by Apollo. And Apollo is the god of the sun, and also of music in ancient Greece. And here he's also the god of, you could say, he's also a god who argues, he makes a logical argument about why Orestes should not be guilty of his mother's murder. And you can let me know what you think about that argument. It might bring out the feminist in you. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, of course, the patron saint of Athens, is also presides over the trial. And I hate to give it all away, but Orestes ends up being acquitted. But what happens after that is the avenging spirits of his mother, the Furies, are incensed. They can't believe they've been cheated. He killed his mother. How does he get away with it? There are different ways to read the play. You can think of it in the one sense of, I've talked a little bit about family and the drama of family, and it's how it's wound up into ancient Greek tragedy. And so what you see in the Eumenides or the Furies is a change from a kind of law or that operates under blood guilt. That in which the family has to take justice into its own hand and avenge another family member, to law, to something where there's this sort of an orderly system, a courtroom, a jury, where these decisions about these terrible crimes can be looked at by a jury of peers, but looked at rationally. And what happens in the play is that Athena promises the fairies that they will be part of this place. They will somehow protect, and she changes them from these awful, writhing, snake-headed spirits into these kindly-minded Eumenides. And there's actually, if you keep an eye on it at the end of the play, a transformation of their costumes. It appears that they are changed from dark robes into bright white robes, or at any rate, from dark into light. And I mark that again because I really want you to think about the use of color and image by Aeschylus in his language. Think about how, again, color and image work in an ancient Greek play, again, where the set is very simple and very stark. So a small change, like a costume change, the changes of colors can be very noticeable. And also think about, okay, I understand that, Professor Chew's telling me all this stuff about this play and what's going to happen, but this is a tragedy? I thought tragedies were supposed to be about, terrible things happening, and then, the hero suffers a lot, and that's what a tragedy is about. First of all, if you really look at ancient Greek tragedy, some of the plays don't really fit that model. There are even some plays by Euripides that could be said to have something of a happy ending, or at least not entirely a tragic ending. It's not always Iphigenia getting sacrificed in ancient Greek tragedies. So, I think it's you can't just say that a tragedy is a play where bad things happen. Yes, bad things happen, but kind of think of it in terms of Aristotle. There's a protagonist, who leads the action forward. The audience is made to feel fear for what will happen to this protagonist because of the things he or she has to encounter. Another word that Aristotle uses is hamartia. It means a tragic flaw, an error. So in this case for Orestes, he's born into this family, this house of Atreus, which has a very bloody history. If some of you looked at the webpage that talked about the house of Atreus, Agamemnon is the noble king of Argos, but his father is guilty of some very terrible crimes. Agamemnon's father, Atreus, enraged that his brother, Thyestes, had an affair with his wife, kills two of Thyestes' children, and serves them up to Thyestes in a banquet. And then after Thyestes is eaten, he brings out the heads of Thyestes' children, and it's pretty awful. So that's the history of the House of Atreus. It's a history that Orestes inherits, and of course, it's not his fault. He was born into something that is beyond himself. And so, what Aristotle, according to Aristotle's Poetics, Aeschylus, somehow makes us feel pity and fear for Orestes in both Libation Bearers and in the Furies. And then something occurs. So in ancient Greek tragedy, there's going to be a moment when there's a catharsis. This is actually a medical term that Aristotle uses. It means a purification or ritual purification. So, somehow the audience going through this experience of pity and fear with the protagonist has some, feels some kind of, I don't know, we could say an outlet for emotions. Strong emotions are released. And then the audience is able to, as it were, move along or, have some kind of resolution with the tragic hero through feeling again, feeling with him, sympathizing with him, empathizing with him, with the terrible things that he lives through. Think about all these things, all this stuff, as you're watching this documentary from 2007 called Protagonist by a woman named Jessica Yu. Now, Protagonist is our first documentary we're watching. So unlike the other movies that we've been watching, it combines the 4 stories of 4 men. All of them are in some kinds of extreme situations. One was a German terrorist. Another was a bank robber who robbed over 30 banks. Another was a kung fu expert who devoted himself to a very strict regimen of kung fu as a teenager. And the 4th is a missionary who struggled for all of his life with being homosexual. So in Protagonist, you interviews these 4 men and intertwines their stories. And then on top of that, the entire documentary is structured not exactly according to a Greek tragedy, but with Greek tragedy and the way that a Greek tragedy is structured in mind. You might say to yourself, well, what kind of a documentary is this? It's going to be 4 talking heads. Well, it is, but in order to reenact, to represent what the 4 men are talking about in the film, you do something very interesting. She takes a play by Euripides. It's called The Bacchae. It's one of Euripides' last plays. It's a very, very weird play. It was, Euripides dies in about 407 BCE. The play was produced maybe around then. Or maybe not, and it is a very weird and mystical play. I encourage you to read it. I'll put up give you a reference to that. But in the play, a young king named Pentheus is angry about the importation of the rites, R-I-T-E-S, of Dionysius, of the sort of the religious rituals and the cult, you could say, of the god Dionysius. So and one reason is that all the women in Pentheus' city have been are intoxicated by Dionysus, by his rituals, and have all joined them. So, and Pentheus, he goes on sort of a campaign, you could say, to eradicate the Dionysian rituals and the god Dionysius himself, who shows up as a character in the play. Something really bad happens. Pentheus, even though he wants to get rid of these awful rituals, he also really is curious about them. So he ends up, he is tricked, or he is allowed by the god Dionysius to sit in a tree and watch the rituals of the women who have all, become intoxicated by Dionysius' cult. And Pentheus falls out of the tree, and something really, really bad happens. He's torn to pieces by a group of raving women. One of them includes his own mother. And his own mother is shown in the tragedy, at the end of it, walking back to the palace with the head of her son on a stick. She thinks that is the head of a bull that she and the other woman, intoxicated with religious frenzy, have torn apart. But there's a moment in the play where she recognizes what has gone on. This is also refers to a term in Aristotle's Poetics, anagonoristis. It means a recognition. It's a moment when a character in a tragedy realizes what is really going on, what is the truth. In the case of the mother of Pentheus, Agawe, it's a pretty awful truth. She's killed her own son and is walking around with his head on a stick. In her movie Protagonist, she takes scenes from the Bacchae and has them acted with puppets. It's weird and ghoulish, and it captures again something I think of ancient Greek tragedy, because the puppets look like actors in an ancient Greek tragedy. There were, with the masks, the puppets are, they move in these strange kind of stilted movements in these very stilted sets. And she overlaps the sort of narrative from the Bacchae with the stories of the four extremists. And it's very powerful, I think. I think that it captures something about, what is going on with a Greek tragic hero in an ancient Greek tragedy, where he's on this kind of, this personal odyssey, this quest, like Orestes. He's got to avenge his father. And then, something terrible happens, and then there's some kind of, in Orestes' case, there's a recognition that he's just done something really terrible. Now he's killed his mother, who did kill his father, but he's killed his own mother, the recognition, the anagoristis. And in the case of Orestes, there is, he goes crazy. After he sees what he does, the extremists in Jessica Yu's film, they all have some kind of recognition too. And then something else happens, though, in this that she, shows in her documentary. This is best described by another Aristotelian term, peripeteia. Peripeteia means literally a walking around. Peri means around in ancient Greek. And what happens is, after this recognition, the anagonoristis, each of these characters in Yu's film, Protagonist, has some kind of turnaround. Something changes dramatically in their life. They have not only the reckoning, but they act on it. They change something. Something happens. In other words, it's not... And I think about that in terms of the Oresteia. Something terrible happens to Orestes. You can decide whether or not you think he recognizes. He does recognize to some extent what has happened, but, does he really have a turning around, a peripeteia, a changing of heart?